All right, welcome back to this week's episode of the MovieBabble Podcast. This week you've got myself, and I'm joined by Brennan, and we're talking about movies. So it's funny, we talked about last week how Tenet had been delayed indefinitely. Nick was glad that we're not going to have to talk about it every week anymore. And then lo and behold, it has been undelayed indefinitely. So it's been technically rescheduled again. Stateside, it's supposed to open up on September the 3rd, which is after Labor Day weekend. So kind of still getting the holiday boost, but it'll be really interesting because Labor Day weekend is typically a small weekend for movies. That's quite honestly, it's normally the deadest weekend of the year traffic wise. So it's interesting that they would pick that weekend, but with movies having been closed for so long and people just thirsty for content and thirsty for Tenet, I feel like weirdly they could turn this into a successful weekend, even though it never really has been in the past.
Yeah, so you look at that weekend there specifically. I think that it's a good buffer zone. End of the summer. I think it's pretty smart. Just it's going to be different, obviously, because as you said, it's usually a quiet weekend at the box office. It's usually kind of just getting ready to end the summer, head back to school. Some places, obviously, in the States are in school by that point, but it's going to be different this year around with Tenet there. And I think that I saw reports today saying that around 80% of U.S. theaters will be open for that weekend. So that is pretty huge. They wanted that and they got that. For me specifically up in Canada, a lot of the rest of the country had theaters open in late June, early July. But due to my close proximity to Toronto, a major city center, it was held off until actually 2 days ago. So my local theater did reopen, and all the theaters in this area have. Capacity's capped at 50 people per room, depending on the size of the theater. If it's a really tiny theater, they just space out a couple seats in between. The IMAX, which seats nearly 300, is only sitting 50. But I think that's a smart and safe way to go about it. And I looked at the slate of what's playing right now, and it's a bunch of classics. You got stuff ranging from Harry Potter to Dirty Dancing to Jurassic Park to Jaws to Pulp Fiction, Lord of the Rings, a couple new stuff. Trolls World Tour is playing, but that's what they have running now until I guess Tenet comes out, and then actually SpongeBob, the SpongeBob film is coming out also mid-August as well. So it's great to see theaters back open right now. I'm still a little bit cautious. I'm going to wait a little bit before I check it out, but we're definitely here taking a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because we've completely eclipsed the summer blockbuster season at this point. So, normally it starts in probably about late April, typically with an Avengers movie. And then it goes on through probably about mid-August, but movie theaters have been shut down during that entire period. So Mulan would have originally been kind of the first big blockbuster of the summer, starting in late March, this past March, and now we're in August, not getting Tenet until end of the month or September 3rd if you're living in the United States. So it'll be interesting to see like how a blockbuster works outside of blockbuster season, and especially with schools just being as up in the air as they are right now as well. Like, will that increase more traffic because kids aren't in class all day? I don't necessarily think Tenet's going to be a big family draw, but it might give parents some more freedom to go during the day. Or how's it going to work without the summer season here to kind of encourage people to already be out and about?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, what we're looking at too with Tenet is it's going to be kind of experimental, but they have no other options, no other route. And as you said, the summer movie season has been completely eclipsed globally. I saw a report. I know that the Asian box office is quite important, and I saw a report the other day that said the first half of the year that they had 92% decrease from last year at the box office, just overall intake, which is pretty bad. I know Tenet needs those China numbers. That's major, and they got the approval to open up in China, so that's huge for them. And obviously, a lot of countries in Asia have they're not done with COVID, but they have come down. Their curves have been dropping substantially over the last few months, especially countries like South Korea and Japan. They have looked very good, and they'll be ready to have Tenet open up on August 26th, actually. So just looking at it right now, you have 70 countries on August 26th where Tenet is set to come out. this feels like the most legit confirmation from Warner Bros. Since the original. I don't know, even the original release date of July 17 was a little bit shaky because they ended up taking the release date off one of those posters or trailers or something. But this seems decently concrete. You look at the numbers and the statistics, it seems like there is a real shot for this to happen. But, we got to be cautious because you never know what's going to happen. It's still about a month to go until then, and anything can happen in a month.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what I'm looking forward to most about Tenet finally releasing is no more people just saying, "We'll just release it online already," which I mean, at this point, we're seeing for pretty much every blockbuster. So I will like not having to see those tweets in my thread constantly.
Yeah, and this is a movie that definitely. I mean, they're holding out so long because it needs to be seen in theaters. This type of movie, right? Like it's grand, it's huge, it's epic, and Nolan's not going to settle for an online release. And I'm sure many directors probably wouldn't want their films to that. Many directors that would want to have that theatrical experience would be against having an online release.
Yeah, and the studio is not gonna drop a movie like this on demand just because of how much money's been put into it. So this is one of the largest independent, but I say independent in the sense that it's not part of a franchise, original high concept blockbusters in a long time, and they're not going to drop a $200 million movie on a streaming service where they're going to get it just dismal returns compared to what you get selling ticket per ticket in the theater.
Definitely, and I actually remember because there is a decent debate between what should go on demand, what should hold off until they go to theaters. And it's slipped my mind now, but there was a director who had come out and actually spoke about how he was upset that one of his movies was shifting to on demand that was supposed to come out in theaters. I really forget who it was though. I'll look into that, but it wasn't a big scale film. It was kind of an indie movie, but he was upset that they optioned for that the studio optioned for the digital route. I'll look into that, but I mean, it's an interesting conversation to be had for sure, especially with COVID.
Yeah, so it's definitely going to be interesting, especially if Tenet ends up moving again, which I think they're going to be pretty firm on this date, just having pushed it off so much. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if they did have to shift it in some markets, particularly domestically, just because of concerns with COVID. So it's definitely an interesting thing to continue to talk about week to week because it's always different.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the big thing is the main reason I think they will try to hold firm here is despite COVID not being eradicated completely, obviously, theaters have been closed now for half a year. I think a little over or a little around 6 months, theaters have been closed. And by the time Tenet comes out, it will be a firm kind of half a year that theaters have been closed. It's very, very rough for the industry. And I mean, all of the economy is taking a pretty major hit because of this, but it's tough, and they do want to hold firm to that slot, and they do want to make sure that this is it. They can get this film out at that point, and they can try to um, save themselves, if you will.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing with theaters is, a lot of industries, went into shutdown, but didn't have to just completely shut down. Whereas something like a movie theater, when you're talking about just the theater chains, if you can't have people in the building, you aren't making money in any capacity. You don't really have anything to sell. I know AMC has like their on-demand streaming service that they're probably seeing some revenues from. But I mean, these are companies that haven't been able to pull a dollar in since March, and in looking at the worldwide box office, really since January or February. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something that they need to get their doors open if they want to continue to keep them open.
No, for sure, and it's going to be rough. I mean, we're going to see the ramifications for this for a while. I know that obviously, as you alluded to, there are some chains, major chains, that have their own streaming services. I know that some of the local theaters here also do that. But one of the funnier things I saw was one of the theaters in my town was actually during the lockdown. I think they went down mid-March. I think by mid-April they were selling their popcorn on Uber Eats.
Yeah, I know some local theaters here were doing that as well, just to keep open. And I mean, really, the drive-ins have really thrived in this, but
For sure.
everyone else is hurting.
Yeah.
But that's enough depression for now, I think. Um, we'll move on to the Netflix top 10, which is actually pretty consistent with where it was at last week. Nothing here that was just too surprising. The Kissing Booth 2 still in the number one spot, which is funny because I haven't really seen anybody review this with more than 1 star, but apparently a lot of people are watching it. And then Animal Crackers in the number 2 spot, Zookeeper at number 3, Rogue Warrior: The Hunt at number 4, Latte and the Magic Waterstone at number 5, The Old Guard at number 6, Seriously Single at number 7, Tread at number 8, The Original Kissing Booth at number 9, and The Lorax at number 10. So I think a couple interesting things. One, Despicable Me not on the list, but The Lorax is, and those two are normally always on the list. So it's just interesting to see the Lorax move ahead this week, but not Despicable Me. um, and then the Kissing Booth is apparently pretty popular. It's been working pretty well for Netflix, even though nobody seems to really care for it.
Yeah, so number 1 right now, trending Kissing Booth 2, number 9, The Kissing Booth. 2 weeks ago or so, I looked on the upcoming schedule calendar and I saw that Kissing Booth 2 was coming out. So I implored myself and I watched the first one. Not good at all. And the second one's really on par with the first one. But there's weirdly this following online that really likes it. I don't know what the demographic would be, but I see I see from time to time. It's hard to find, but you'll find it on Twitter from time to time. People who are just in love with this thing, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the cheesiness. Maybe it's the fact that maybe they're young teenage girls. Who knows? But it's just not very good. And the way this second one ended off, there will be a third one as well. And Netflix, I mean, it's big for them, right? Like this is one of their bigger properties. A very similar franchise to me is Netflix's other one, To All the Boys. I Loved Before, I believe is what it's titled. I actually didn't mind the first movie there, and the second one I thought was okay too. But this is kind of like the really bad version of that. So while that franchise is okay, this one's just really bad.
Yeah, it's just sad looking at all the reviews on Letterboxd. Um, they're all 1 stars. Why did I watch this? This was too long. Just bad vibes coming off of the Kissing Booth too.
Oh, it was ridiculously long. I mean, the first one was, I think, 145, which for a movie like this, that's pretty much the cap that I would say is reasonable. A movie like this should be 95 minutes. But then I looked at the runtime of the second one there, and it was 135 minutes or something like that, and I was just shocked. So I sit down. It's a little over 2 hours and 10 minutes. Like, this is just ridiculous, and it you could feel it for sure. But at least I ordered some food and I ate it while I watched. So like when I do that, I don't feel as awful watching a painfully long bad movie, but it wasn't pleasurable.
Yeah, my favorite review on Letterboxd is just a list. It says movies The Kissing Booth 2 is longer than, and it's longer than all of the following movies: Rear Window, 12 Angry Men, Sunset Boulevard, Good Will Hunting, Sing in the Rain, To Kill a Mockingbird, Moonlight, Lady Bird, The Grand Budapest Hotel, Whiplash, The Empire Strikes Back, Her, The Social Network, La La Land, Dunkirk, Nightcrawler, Do the Right Thing, Spotlight, The Favorite, and Gravity. Just why? Like, why would it need to be longer than any of these movies?
No, that's just, yeah, I don't know. Like that's baffling. That's a good review right there. That's a good Letterboxd bit.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't really plan on ever visiting any of the Three Kissing Booth movies. I know Nick is a big fan of it, but it's not for me.
I'll second that with you there. I mean, I checked them out, but they are abysmal.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I'm just not really excited about much of Netflix's top 10 this week. There's just not really a lot going on. I mean, you do have Zookeeper in there, which is, I have like really vague memories of watching that when it came out, almost 10 years ago. But that's just kind of a surprise to see back at the top. It's no Paul Blart, but I do like Kevin James, so respect for that.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's no Paul Blart. That's elite tier Kevin James right there.
But then it is interesting to see the old guard, which is just really strongly stuck out in the top 10 for Netflix. But it's just been like a massive movie for them. Also, it is shorter than The Kissing Booth 2, which again doesn't make sense. But Netflix is really milking the old guard pretty hard.
Yeah, for sure. And have you checked it out?
I haven't gotten around to it yet. No.
No, I haven't either. But Nick said it was a good time, and it's definitely building for some sort of franchise. So I will check it out at some point. I don't know. I just haven't really had the time or the I guess overly urging feeling to sit down and watch this. I kind of want to watch Extraction first because I still haven't checked that one out from a few months ago, but they're definitely on my list.
Yeah, and, I mean, for me, it's something where I just don't have the draw to go watch it right away. I've got a lot of like must see movies that I'm trying to cross off my list and that I've been using most of this COVID shutdown to get through. And some new content makes it on, but some of it I'll just put off and add to the bottom of the list.
Yeah, yeah. So you're right. I think, and even for me, I think um, even for me, like the last few months, uh, I was kind of following a list of what I needed to check out. But these last few weeks, I haven't gotten bored with the list, but I've kind of just went off and I decide kind of right on the spot, and that's kind of been fun for me. But yeah, maybe I'll get into some sort of routine for August because there are some franchises I want to go revisit and check out. One of them actually I'm in the middle of watching right now. And we'll touch on that later on the podcast.
Yeah, so that's Netflix's top 10 this week. Um, Not a lot of exciting stuff going on. Hopefully, we'll see Despicable Me uh, carrying it again next week, but for now, it's pretty quiet. And then there were actually a handful of new releases this past weekend. I don't know if you got around to any of them, but I did check out Yes God Yes, which was just a really good watch. I like it. It's only an hour and 18 minutes long, so it's not a kissing booth. It's a light commitment, but it really explores like the world of Catholic schools or just private schools in general, even, and how teens are talked to about sex and just like the it sounds really cliche, but like the transition of puberty into becoming an adult and like how do you deal with all these feelings and urges and all the ickiness out in the world amidst all of that. But I thought it was just like a really sincere, really awkward, like coming of age movie. I thought Natalia Dyer, who's in Stranger Things, just did a terrific job with the material. And again, it's under an hour and a half, so that's always delightful. And it's just a fun commentary on just kind of this environment.
Yeah. So Nick, I forget if you mentioned it, but Nick did check this out too, right?
Yeah. Nick and I both really enjoyed this from what I understand of his review.
Yeah, no, for sure. And this is something that is on demand.
Yeah, so this it's not on a streaming service, but it can be rented. I watched it on Amazon. I think it was like $6, or you can buy it for 9. So it's a pretty good deal. It's not at that $20 rental, which a lot of new releases have been at in the
Hmm.
wake of everything. So it's not a big financial commitment either.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I've been waiting actually with a lot of those $20 ones because I feel like you wait a couple months and they'll probably drop down to the regular price. Like Scoob is one that I'm still waiting on to drop down. Have you gone back and revisited that at all?
No, it's on HBO Max, so it's just kind of dangling in front of me.
Okay.
But based on everything I've heard about it, it's definitely going to be a rainy day movie,
Yeah,
something that I'm not really in a rush to get into.
right. Yeah, another one that actually I do still want to check out is Capone. I remember that came out. I think it came out at kind of a reasonable price, but I have a streaming service called Canopy through my local library, and actually they put it up there like a week or two ago for free. So that's another one of those on demands from a few months ago that I'm definitely going to be checking out soon.
Yeah, I definitely recommend Yes God Yes. I think it's just it's a sincere delight is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I'll be sure to definitely check it out, as I do want to try to watch more 2020 movies that aren't kissing booth too.
Yeah, and that's something that I haven't been as good at. Is just keeping up with 2020 movies since the theater's gone. Kind of the allure is there, and instead of just like watching new content, I'm like I should catch up on old stuff. So my 2020 films list is still pretty small. I wanna beef that up a little bit.
Yeah, I think I just actually eclipsed the 40 mark in terms of 2020 movies, which, considering, like, all things considered, I think is actually not too bad. A lot of them have been obviously Netflix movies over the last few months, but I'm not too upset with that number. I know that you hit up Sundance right early in the year, so you're probably a little bit ahead in that respect.
I'm actually only at 32 so far, and the
Okay.
majority of those have been Sundance movies.
Hmm.
But my first time watch list, which is just stuff that didn't release this year, but that I saw for the first time, is already up to 90. And by the end
Very
of the
good.
year last year, it was only up to 55. So I'm still putting in work on that front.
Yeah, no, it's been a good year. I kept track last year and the year before of just how many movies I watched, period. And I think last year I finished up around 280, and that's not new movies. That's just everything. So movies, um, 2020s, old movies I've seen that I've rewatched, stuff like that. Just a watch in general. And I think I was around 270 or 280. I'm already past that now. I think I'm near 300 total. So, uh, COVID has really made an impact on that list.
Yeah, so it's definitely thrown my numbers off, but I've still gotten a lot in, which I'm thankful for.
Yeah, fantastic. No, for sure.
But yeah, that's new stuff coming out. We'll have American Pickle at the end of this week, which I'm excited to watch. Am disappointed that Seth Rogen does not look like an actual pickle, but you know. Um, but again, I have been streaming stuff and watching new stuff, and I know you've been doing the same and have been working through a trilogy of your own. So if you want to talk about that, we can jump into what we've been watching.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I started off 2 nights ago. It's the Three Colors Trilogy, French, Polish kind of films. Came out in the mid 90s. So the first one, Three Colors Blue, is pretty much all French. And actually, it's weird because the second movie doesn't really follow the first one at all. I presume, I think, just from what I've heard about the third one, which I haven't seen yet, they cross over. But the second movie, there's only kind of one scene that shows that these two movies connect. However, I did really enjoy Blue. I think it's a very experimental, kind of artistic movie. I really liked it a lot. I think it's a movie that I'll like more on future watches, because I really had no idea what, like, besides knowing that these are some of the most kind of revered foreign films in history. I didn't really know too much about what they were about at all. So I had a great time with the first one. The second one was kind of like a interesting, interesting film, because it wasn't as artistic or um, as daring as the first one, but it definitely had a much more easy to follow, or more engaging plot, I'd say. The second one, Three Colors White. That one, however, felt kind of like a long Black Mirror episode. So that's kind of a it's a little bit entertaining in that respect. But I'm definitely looking forward to the third one and seeing where they cross over.
Yeah, that's something that I'm not very familiar with, but I do understand the reference, and it's all over. Anytime somebody's talking about the Criterion collection, the Three Colors trilogy comes up pretty often. So it's definitely something I want to dive into at some point.
Yeah, no, it's good, and it's good. I mean, the first one, I think, is they all kind of have a different theme as well, which is interesting. And the first one was very, a little bit more emotional than the second one, but I liked it a lot. There was a lot of existential stuff in the first one, which is always interesting to watch on screen. Really good music that played throughout it. But overall, I really did enjoy the first one. The second one, I didn't personally enjoy as much, but I know some people that like white more than blue. I think red is known to be quite good, but I think I'm going to be checking that out tonight.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm glad to know someone who's checking it out so I can understand a little bit more about it before I jump in.
For sure.
And then I actually watched two kind of big movies that I hadn't seen before this weekend. So I did American Psycho the other night, and then I did The Last Temptation of Christ last night. And American Psycho, I wasn't too crazy about. I feel like it weirdly has some more social relevance right now than it does in when it actually came out, just because Donald Trump is a big figure in the book and even in the movie. So I find that really interesting that this kind of critique on him as a person was coming out 20 years before he kind of became the leader of the free world. But just for the movie itself, I just didn't attach to it tremendously. But then Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ was just when Marvin Schwartz says "What a picture" in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that was just how I feel about this movie. It's just this really honest look at like the character of Jesus Christ, and so it's a very controversial film. When this movie came out in 1989, I believe, or 1988, some movie theaters were burned down for showing it. Scorsese had to have bodyguards for a couple years just because the reaction to this movie was just incredibly controversial. It was just an uproar, especially within the Catholic community. The book it was based on was actually banned by the Catholic Church for quite a while. But I think it's just this really honest exploration of Jesus and like the temptation that he went through and the trials of his life and what it meant to be part man and part God. And honestly, as someone who grew up watching a lot of like those cheesy Christian movies, I think this was probably the best portrayal I've ever seen of that character, just because of how honest and kind of introspective it is to what his life meant to himself and to other people.
Yeah, this is one that I'm definitely going to watch at some point. That's crazy though. I knew that it was quite controversial, but I didn't know it had to lead to him getting bodyguards and theaters getting burned down. I do know, however, that it was banned in several countries um, overseas whenever it first came out. I think one of them being Singapore. I forget a few other ones, but this was banned in several countries back in the day, and I think it's still banned in one country still to this day. But yeah, that's a very interesting point, and I am looking forward to watching this. Willem Dafoe is the lead, right?
Yeah, Willem Dafoe, David Bowie's actually in the movie.
Hmm.
It just, I mean, he's maybe in like 2 or 3 minutes of the movie, but he has a really good scene. And yeah, Willem Dafoe just, I mean, is just, I grew up with him as the Green Goblin, and I think you did the same. And a lot of times it's hard for me to see beyond that when I see him in a movie, but I was just completely immersed in his performance here.
Yeah, no, for sure. Green Goblin for sure. But he's someone that I've watched a lot more movies with him in them this year than I ever have before, I believe. And he's a fantastic actor and a lot of talent. But I love seeing him in movies. He's always a gem.
Yeah, really, my only complaint with this movie, and it's more indicative of just Hollywood at the time, and honestly, even Hollywood now more than it is the movie itself, but just how whitewashed a lot of it feels.
Hmm.
So, I mean, Jesus, I love Willem Dafoe, but he's pretty white. So is Harvey Keitel, who's playing Judas. Um, so there's a lot of very prominent white actors, but yet in the background you do have a lot of more location appropriate actors playing the Jewish people and the Roman people there and the Arabic people that are all present within that story. So the white Jesus and a handful of the white disciples feel really out of place. But again, I think that's more indicative of just how movies got made, particularly at that time, and
Yeah.
even now. There's just unfortunately a tendency to lean more towards a white casting, even if it's not appropriate for the work.
No, for sure. 100%. I think that is something to note for sure, and definitely something that I mean it's with the times, and I think we've hopefully made progress since then. But 1980s, it is a while back, and I'm not too surprised that you point that out, especially with Hollywood at the time.
But yeah, overall, loved the movie. Would highly recommend it. Just a great movie. Thank you, Martin Scorsese.
Quickly though, going back to American Psycho, I watched it. I think a little over a year ago now for the first time, and I think maybe I felt the way you did. I did actually like it quite a bit. However, I didn't love it like I know that a lot of people do. However, over time, I think I've grown to appreciate it a little bit more. Maybe you will too, but I did find Christian Bale's performance quite hilarious, though.
Yeah, I really like that, and I really like the dialogue in the movie. I think probably one of the most famous scenes is where they're looking at all of the the business cards, and it's just Christian Bale's internal monologue talking about the subtle off-white coloring and everything. But I like just how deadpan yet over the top all the dialogue is, and pretty much any scene in the movie, just how the characters are interacting and talking to one another.
Yeah, no, that you're right. I think that's the best part of the film. And there's also one scene, especially with Willem Dafoe and Christian Bale. Do you remember the scene there when he's kind of interviewing him?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know because it's been a while since I've read this little tidbit. I don't know if I'm 100% bang on, but I read that because I believe there are three different sort of cuts in that scene to Willem speaking or something like that, and they or no, they filmed three different versions of the scene, where Willem is suspicious of him, one where he's not, and one where he's there was another thing in there, but apparently the scene is actually a mix of all three. I don't know if you noticed that at all.
Yeah, it does seem a little off-putting at times because Willem Dafoe seems to not necessarily become a different character, but just kind of jump a little bit in his performance. But I think it builds with I think it really builds off of the uneasiness in the scene and kind of that whole motif that runs throughout the film where you're not quite sure if Patrick is really talking to anyone or present in the moment or if it's something that's going on in his head. But I think it pays off really well.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a unforgettable scene for sure.
So yeah, it's one of those things that it also probably didn't help that it's a movie that I was very familiar with what was going to happen before going into it because it's
Right.
such a part of the public consciousness. That maybe if I had gone in blind, I would have been a little bit more floored, or if I had grown up seeing it and was watching it again, maybe I'd feel differently. But for now, it was a good movie, but nothing that I'd elevate to great.
Yeah, no, that's good to know, and it's one that I'll probably have to revisit at some point too.
So yeah, that is my thoughts on American Psycho and The Last Temptation of Christ. I'm gearing up to watch Lord of the Rings, the extended cuts this week. Been reading all of the books for about the past like a month and a half or so. And so I should finish this week and we'll dive into all 13 hours of Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah, that'll be good. That's something that I've planned to do this summer, but I just haven't done that yet. Like I think back in May, I said I would do it this summer, watch them all again. It's been several years since I have. I just haven't done it, but that's something I'm definitely going to have to get done in August.
Yeah, I've only seen the extended editions once, and that was when I was on pain meds for my wisdom teeth. So I don't fully remember the majority of it, at least not the stuff I hadn't seen before in the regular editions. So this will sort of be a first time for me again, even though I've already seen them all.
Yeah, and they're all on Canadian Netflix right now, which is pretty reasonable and pretty easy for me to get to.
Yeah, it's not something I grew up with, but it's always just like a big highlight whatever week of the year that I sit down to watch Lord of the Rings, just because it is just such an epic and just brilliantly impossible filmmaking that all came together.
Yeah, no, for sure, and it's kind of like lightning in a bottle in a way, especially after. I mean, we went into it super in depth a few weeks or maybe a month or so ago now about everything with the Hobbit and stuff like that. But it is definitely lightning in a bottle, and I mean, it's earned its right to be called a classic.
Yeah, so I'll be back talking about those next week. We'll be back talking about An American Pickle. I know Nick's excited for that one, and whatever else we get into this past week. So remember, you can always check us out online at MovieBabble.com, and we'll be back talking about more movies and hopefully not talking about another release date for Tenet next week.